Funny about that. You know who was asking about you the other day? Who's that? Nobody.
We talking about sports, get ball.
What it do, baby? Yeah.
What it do, you number one podcast listeners? This is a great episode, a championship episode for those of us in Buckeye Nation, like I know so many of you are, who are tuning in, and if you're not, well, that makes us enjoy it even more. Our Ohio State Buckeyes are national champions, and you've tuned into the number one podcast in your headphones, Prem Brulee. I'm your host, Premal Bhatt, and you know I had to do it. I'm joined by my big bro, fellow Ohio State alum, Vish Bhatt.
Let's go!
Let's
fucking go!
Truly, the most improbable of national championships, just like the one in 2014. Our Ohio State Buckeyes won the first 14 playoff, and now they've won the first 12-team playoff, and I truly can't believe it. We got a lot to cover, but those of us in Columbus, in Ohio, all across the world, Ohio State runs deep, and we are basking in this and loving every second of it. But without further ado, you number one podcast listeners, it's been a while. Happy New Year. We had to kick it off with a bang, and Ohio State delivered. So without further ado, let's get started on this number one podcast in your headphones, the first edition of 2025. Let's get it, Vish.
Let's do it.
Okay, first up, of course, is Yafim or Nah. And you know we have to cover it. Now that it is wrapped up its first year of the expanded version, last episode, Akshay and I talked a lot about the format. But I want to get your take now that it's wrapped up. The NCAA College Football Playoffs, the 12-team format that debuted this past season, yeah, fam, or nah? Before I get your take, I do want to do a little bit of news because I did a little bit of research. All of this for you, you number one podcast listeners.
Look at that.
You tune in here for the news, the hot takes, everything. It looks as though seating rules probably won't change for the next season. The reason is any changes for 2025 require unanimous approval by the 11 presidents and chancellors who make up the College Football Playoffs Board of Managers. But starting in 2026, any changes will no longer require unanimous approval, and pretty much rightfully so, and what you would all expect, the Big Ten and SEC will have the bulk of control over the format. This was something that was agreed to during the college football playoff contract negotiation. They essentially said after the two first years, we'll cede control, the majority of the control, to the two biggest conferences. So if you're looking for changes in thinking, hey, we need to change up these buys, we need to change up these matchups, all the different options that you heard Akshat and I talk about last episode, then you'll likely have to wait till 2026, but it should be easier to get done after this coming season. Not to say it can't get done. They have meetings on the books coming up, but it's going to be less likely because what reason would one of the smaller conferences have to agree to that? So, Vish, back to the task at hand, the college football playoffs. Yeah, fam, or nah?
All right. So I can go two different ways here. And just because it's customary, I'm going to say no. It's 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 1 year in. It felt weird with Boise and Arizona State getting the bye weeks. I think if they needed to make a change, it might be reseeding it and having, the top seed play the lowest remaining seed or something like that. But ultimately, after 1 year, you can't say this is what's going to happen, right? So if you took the 2014 championship, and Ohio State won that one as well, but Florida State was undefeated, and they were number 3 in that poll and going into the top 4. So Ohio State made it, Alabama made it, Oregon made it. They were all one loss. They did win their conferences, but again, it was an anomaly. So maybe it corrects itself. Maybe there is no Boise or Arizona State that ends up rearing its ugly head. But I think in a couple years, there might be some more people at the table. The SEC probably is outside looking in, especially this year. But, it was don't lose late the way they did, and don't have 3 losses. So, at the end of the day, I'm okay with how it is, just to see how it works. And, it also helps that the Buckeyes won. But what about you?
Yeah, exactly. It goes without saying we're fam related to the results. It worked out in Ohio State's favor. They went on a crazy 4-game run. More on covering the full scope of that in a little while. But so far, I'm a fam to the 12-team playoff, and I do think they got the 12 teams right. But I am I agree with you, well, somewhat here. And I talked about all the different options, but they have to get the seeding right. And the evidence was from all the teams that we thought were going to lose that somehow got the bye did. I think the closest one, obviously Arizona State had a real chance to beat Texas and probably should have, if we're being real. If they didn't bring an all-out blitz on a 4th and long, maybe we're having a different conversation. But I do think the bye should go to the 4 most deserving teams. I do think conference championship should matter, and that should get you in the dance. You're going to see me have a very similar take, spoiler alert, as we talk about the NFL. But yeah, at the bare minimum, they should reseed. I do think at the bare minimum, they should think about matchups when they submit their final rankings, because Oregon did get shafted. They were the best team all year. They were the clear number 1, and they had the worst path to a championship, the Final Four, all the above. It's almost as if they got penalized. So they need to get it right. I do think they will. I'm going to be patient. We have this championship to rest easy on, and we'll wait those changes at the very least, sounds like, in a couple years.
Do you think conference championships will go away?
I think people are going to really think about it. I already saw a report that the ACC is considering modifying their championships. I think the more likely scenario is that they're going to play one less regular season game to account for it. I still think the conference championships are going to matter because that's going to get you an automatic bid. Maybe they'll matter less for the 2 big conferences, but the other ones I think will still matter. So we won't see a cheapened product like that. And it did seem like the committee still rewarded teams for playing in and ultimately losing their conference championship, evidenced by Penn State having a higher ranking than Ohio State in the final rankings entering the playoff. It's almost as if they considered losses in the conference championship as half a loss, like we talked about last episode. So I don't think they'll go away. I don't think they want them to go away. So I think they'll do what they have to protect the sanctity of those. But maybe you see some strategy by the 2 big conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC. But I did want to take a moment to bask in this. I promise you, number 1 podcast listeners, I would. I truly can't believe this national championship. If you would have told me less than 2 months ago after that abysmal performance against Michigan that Ohio State would be hoisting the trophy, especially given their potential path to a title, I would have called you absolutely crazy, and so did a lot of other Buckeye fans. Then I think about this happened because of an expanded playoff system, because a team in Ohio State that wouldn't have made the 4-team version that we had previously won it all. And then you're thinking about probably a team that made it to the semifinal wouldn't have either, because if this was still a 4-team playoff, the 4 teams would have been Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and probably Notre Dame, with Penn State and Ohio State being the first 2 out, and they wouldn't be competing in the college football playoff in the 4-team version. Ultimately, I'm just so happily wrong about Ryan Day and these Buckeyes. I couldn't have been more wrong. They really figured out a way to galvanize the group after that truly awful loss against Michigan. They there were reports that they were so together. They seem like they've always loved playing for Ryan Day. Now, one would argue they have a unique way of showing it on the final regular season game against Michigan for the past 4 years. But do I think this championship happens without that loss to Michigan? Probably not. Or at least maybe not in the same way, the same emphatic way, because they totally look like the team we were expecting all year after that loss. It's almost like it gave them permission to put the pedal to the floor. I truly cannot believe this. It feels surreal when I was watching the coverage. It's like, couldn't believe this insane run starting in December in that cold game in the Horseshoe full of Tennessee fans. The feeling of kind of dread and expecting a letdown to seeing pure domination for the next 2 games and then beating 2 really good physical teams the last 2 games, I didn't see coming, because they hadn't shown it all year, and they waited to the perfect time to do it and prove all of us wrong and make us all look like idiots happily. Ohio State finished number 1 in the AP Top 25, obviously, in the final rankings. They beat the rest of the AP's top 5 teams, plus number 9 and 10. Say that again. The Associated Press's number 1 team beat teams 2 through 5 in their final rankings for the season, and tacked on beating number 9 and 10 in the final rankings. The final college football playoff rankings had Ohio State number 6. Of course, they were not that seed. They ended up being the 8th seed. But the 6th-ranked Buckeyes beat 6 out of the other 7 in the top 8 of that final rankings. Out of the top 8 teams in the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings entering the playoff, Ohio State was 6, so 7 other teams, they beat 6 of them. The one they didn't play being Georgia.
Insane.
Truly insane. And they did so. They beat those 6 teams, 6 out of those 7 top teams, by an average margin of nearly 17 points. They had wins over number 1 Oregon, number 3 Texas, number 4 Penn State earlier in the season, number 5 Notre Dame in the national championship, number 7 Tennessee, and number 8 Indiana earlier in the season. It is truly an undisputed, improbable, and exclamation-marked national championship by the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm so happily wrong about Ryan Day and this Buckeye team after losing 4 straight to Michigan. Now, they still need to figure out this Michigan monkey on their back. Something happens to Ryan Day in that game where I truly, mental health experts need to look at it, but that's for later. You had Will Howard transferring in. You had offensive line injuries galore. They lost an All-American center late in the season. They lost their left tackle midway through the season. They reshuffled the line. An offensive line coach that was highly criticized. He was the weak point in the position coaches. He figured it out. He found a combination that worked and did it multiple times. They had to shuffle things. Their All-American guard, Donovan Jackson, switched to left tackle. And did incredible at left tackle. And then you're thinking about running backs who both decided to team up, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, who were both former 1,000-yard backs, and they decided, you know what, let's team up in the same backfield. Let's save ourselves some wear and tear by having both of us here. And their plan worked to perfection. They both rushed for 1,000 yards and managed to put less strain on their workload. They both stayed healthy, and they're both going to head into the NFL draft with less tread on their tires. Literally the reason they came here was less workload and still getting production, and it worked out to perfection. They had Emeka Egbuka, who's now the all-time receptions leader in Ohio State history. Yes, out of all the receivers that have come through. and he passed 1,000 yards in that national championship game. So Ohio State finished the season with 2 1,000-yard running backs and 2 1,000-yard receivers. Unreal. An unreal production from Ohio State. They finally lived up to the expectations everybody had for them entering the season, and they did it at the perfect time in the perfect 4-game stretch against a ridiculously tough 4 teams, and they beat 5 AP top 5 teams this season, which is a record all time, on their way to doing it. Truly incredible. Truly an incredible run. Can't believe the difference from the end of November to midway through January to be seeing this team with so much confidence and performing to their ability and pretty well dominating some really fucking good teams.
I mean, the gauntlet that they went through, it's 100%. I mean, nothing else can be added. And I think it's something where you alluded to a little bit before. Judkins comes in, teams up with Travion Henderson. Fantastic. The sentiment out there is, Ohio State bought their way to a championship, right? They invested. Yes, They got a Caleb Downs, Judkins, and even a Will Howard who looked phenomenal. I would say all year long, except for some minor gaffes. And for the most part, he had the highest completion percentage in Buckeye history. Out of all their recent quarterbacks that Ryan Day has been part of and all of that, that's saying a lot for that type of athlete, that type of player. And we paid a lot of money for returning players and stuff, but even if we say we bought our way to a championship, at least we didn't cheat our way to a championship.
Petty alert, petty alert, petty alert.
Amen. Sound that, baby. Immediately approved. By the way, I do have to stop people right there. The reason Ohio State has that narrative attached to them is because their athletic director attached a number to their NIL spending. You better believe other programs spent the same amount, if not more. And they are counting their lucky stars. They get to hide behind Ohio State being the only one to name their number. It is very, very commonplace at this point for those top teams. Texas for sure had to have. And you named the few transfers Ohio State brought in. You, again, alluded to it. That money that is floated around, that $20 million, was to keep players that they've already developed in program who's decided to stay for this exact goal of winning a national championship. So to say that they bought this is incredibly reductive and lazy, and it just shows how much you don't know about the sport right now, because every team's doing it, and the fact of the matter is it's just the Wild West, and it's legal now. So that's the problem you have. It's not with Ohio State. They're just the ones that get all the attention for it, but everybody's spending that same amount, and arguably some teams are getting in more transfers. It's just Ohio State's few transfers they got in were very impactful. The ones you mentioned, Howard, Judkins, Caleb Downs, Seth McLaughlin, that's pretty much all of them. I think I named all their transfers minus they had a tight end, Kazmarek from OU, and that makes up the 5 people outside of the program that they brought in, which they did not get the entire $20 million. I guarantee you that.
Well, and I think it even speaks to whatever that buy-in was from that returning class for the Buckeyes outside the transfers. Yes, it helps to get a Caleb Downs, who's a premier defensive player, probably top 5 in the NFL draft, was able to come out today. But considering what they went through at the end of the year last year, right, where they lost to the school up north, and we'll talk about that again. They got embarrassed essentially in the bowl game. That didn't mean anything, but they only put up 3 points against Missouri, right? And so for this team to buy in the way they did, it was actually very surprising. You saw one by one all these players say, I'm coming back. They're day one, first round picks, day 2. Yeah. And so for them to buy in that way, they probably solidified themselves. The defensive line, Ibuka, like they're probably about where they would have been last year. They got a little bit more money,
if not better,
out of that. But I think it just kind of speaks to that. And the people that they brought in, they fit into what that culture already exists, and that was the key, right? You saw what happened to Florida State early on. They spent a shit ton of money in the NIL, and it did not work. Yeah. It worked the previous year, but it completely blew up in their face. So the transfers, it's the right mix of what that looks like, and the teams that do it the best are going to be the teams that make it to the Final Four, the championship game, and eventually hoist that gold trophy at the end. And I think the Buckeyes were one of those teams that did it. And Oregon was one of those teams early on too. So,
yeah. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. I come hat in hand apologizing to Ryan Day and the softer than Charmin Ryan Day supporters this entire time. They ended up being right, as soft as they were, but they were right, and I was wrong, and I'm happily wrong. But your boy, number one podcast listeners, I'm still going to find a way to put something on You Played Yourself, so stay tuned for that. I always deliver for you. The petty never stops, and I will find a way to address some things regarding that situation. You played yourself. But first, I wanted to talk quickly about the NFL playoffs. Vish, we are heading into conference championships, and as we record here, but I've had this bone to pick for years now, and I don't see myself coming off that hill. But I want to get your take on it because I have heard both sides of the story. NFL playoff seeding. Do you, fam, like it as it is? Or nah, feel like it needs changed? So, before you answer that, obviously you know these scenarios. But in case you number one podcast listeners don't or forgot, the Minnesota Vikings were the 5 seed with 14 wins because they finished second in the NFC North to the Lions. On the final week of the season. Additionally, the Washington Commanders had 12 wins and were the 6th seed. Meanwhile, in the NFC, who was the culprit this year, I would say the AFC kind of worked out with seeding and going pretty much chalk. But in the NFC, 2 10-7 teams hosted playoff games because they were obviously in easier divisions. That was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the LA Rams, who both hosted playoff games but had worse records than the teams they played. So before I get your answer, I'll go first on this one. Like I hinted at, I am on a crusade against the NFL's playoff seeding system. I am a nod of their seeding. I think it's ridiculous that teams get penalized for being in a tougher division. I don't think it rewards anything because I just think your record should determine things and not your luck in what division you're in. There were years where the NFC East was the NFC least and there were 8-8 teams hosting playoff games, just happened to be in easier divisions. I just don't think this rewards good teams. I think it penalizes really good teams for being in difficult divisions. The Vikings being the latest culprit, the Commanders being another one who would have had a home playoff game if the seeds went based off strictly record. Now, I do think a division win should count for something. I think it should get you in the playoffs, but I do not think it should get you an automatic home game because you didn't earn it. It's just, I get the argument. You play the schedule you're given, you play the division you're given, but I don't think it warrants doing more than guaranteeing your spot in the playoffs, in the dance. I preemptively see people saying, like, this is the greatest format. What I would counter with that is just because it's the way it has been isn't necessarily true. If this was such a great format, the NFL wouldn't have added a 7th team just a few years ago, so it's not like it's that protected. You can change things. It's okay to. It's okay to accept change in this scenario. There have been too many examples of teams having to play road games just because they were in a difficult division. So it's like, I get you won your division. You think you deserve a home game. It's like for every person that says the Vikings should have beat the Lions, they shouldn't have got swept by them, and they would have had a home game, like, too bad. There's also, okay, the Bucs got swept by the Falcons and played the Saints and Panthers twice. Why does that warrant them a home playoff game? There is arguments on both sides of it. I just think it should strictly be record, and the division should matter for getting a spot in the dance. So I'm a nod of this.
Yeah, I'm not even trying to zag here. I actually think divisions, especially in the NFL, do count for something. There's so much parity in the NFL year after year. Again, you are playing the schedule that's in front of you, and that doesn't matter. But if you kind of look at the Vikings, right, and just take that in a little tunnel or a pocket or however you want to look at it, they had a remarkable season, and so did the Commanders. But if you're really that good and you're really apt to make a run, yes, home field does matter. But at the end of the day, the Vikings' 3 losses, I guess, came, and now 4, I guess, came to 2 teams all year long, the Rams and the Lions. So they lost to the Rams in the regular season, and they lost to them again in the playoffs, right? So the divisions should count for something. The Rams won the NFC West, which historically has gone to the 49ers. So the 49ers had a plethora of injuries this year, down year. We don't know if they'll come back, especially if they play Purdy, blah, blah, blah. That's not for this. But again, they won the division. You should get a home playoff game because of the parity that exists in it. Yes, you got swept by it, but you won your other 4 games, right? And then there's other teams that you also have to play. The Vikings, I think they either finished 3rd or 4th last year. I think it was a toss-up between them and the Bears. So they played a 3rd place schedule this year for all the other NFC teams, right? So what does that look like? Who do they play? The Vikings also played in probably one of the worst divisions out there, and I'm a Texans fan, the AFC South, right? They went undefeated in the AFC South. I think as is the Lions. And so those are the types of things that kind of factor into it. It ends up evening out, but we wouldn't have the beast mode quake game or whatever they call it without that. I think that was either a 7-9 team or an 8-8 team, Seattle, that had to host this juggernaut Saints team. So yes, they're apt to change it, but I think it ends up being where teams that are good, they'll win out, and it's not a Sam Darnold playing out of his ass either, like he did for the Vikings. So I'd rather have Matt Stafford go to the second round than a Sam Darnold go to the second round. That I don't know who would they. I think they would have played the Lions. I think they still would have played the Eagles in that snow game. So considering,
Yeah.
even hindsight 2020, I wouldn't have the Vikings in that place. So
It's wrong, but I hear you. All right. Speaking of seeds, number 1 podcast listeners, I always try to plant seeds of mental health and, more importantly, mental wealth, especially during Too Much Sense, but I try to drop gems all the time. Mental wealth to me is exercising your tools and practice in order to achieve an overall mental health. When things get tough or you enter a rut, that's when your mental wealth kicks in, all the tools you have at your disposal. So in my quest to exercise my mental wealth, I look for tools to assist myself in promoting mental wealth. And that's what Magic Mind has been for me. It's not a solution. It's not meant to be. It's not advertised to be. But I do consider Magic Mind a tool that I use to ensure I'm continuing in the right direction towards mental health and mental wealth. Magic Mind believes there are 5 pillars to achieve mental health: sleep, diet, exercise, stress management, and exogenous compounds, anything that you consume that is good for you, essentially. Magic Mind aligns with these. You know the drill. They got all clean ingredients. They're all scientifically backed with a lot of research. And any caffeine is time release, so you don't get jitters or crash like you would if you took, say, like an energy drink. And now Magic Mind's even more aligned with those pillars because, like I've mentioned previously, they've added sleep shots to go along with their performance shots that I've talked about before. For me, the sleep shots, combining with the performance shots, has allowed for 24 hours of peak mental performance. It ensures I get good, relaxed, recovery-rich sleep so that I have my desired mental performance during the day. Of course, after I take my mental performance shot in the morning, usually, that's how I do mine. Your number one podcast listeners already know about my sustained higher mental clarity by taking the performance shots for consecutive days. The impact builds, and you get like a sustained mental clarity that you wouldn't if you took it sporadically. But new to the fold is the sleep shots. I've now tried 3 nights of using it. The streak ended because of the national championship, but those 3 nights, especially over a long weekend, allowed for a better, deeper rest. And they allowed me to turn my brain off from wearing a lot of different hats, being a professional in the working world, a husband, a father, a friend, brother, son, all that stuff. It allowed me to kind of shut the brain off, be in a good mental state so that I'm ready to tackle the day nice, bright, and early. There's no crash. You don't feel groggy getting up. And then taking my mental performance shot once I'm awake helps get the day boosted and clean and ready to go. So, you number one podcast listeners, I wouldn't be talking about this if I didn't have something for you, because I'm a man of the people. For the first time, there is a brand new offer. They're calling it the 24-hour pack. It combines the focus and sleep shots bundled up for the first time at 45% off. That's an exclusive for you number one podcast listeners because your boys got you covered. Vish, I know you've taken the performance shots. You haven't been able to try the sleep shots, but can't advocate them enough. I'm excited for you to be able to try them. But you number one podcast listeners, I don't just spew this stuff for the hell of it. I have a link for you. I'm going to put in the episode description. But you already know it's magicmind.com, magicmind.com. And we have a new link for you because it's this new bundle. It is magicmind.com/prem, Prem, Jan, Jan. So that's Prem as in Prem Brulee and Jan as in January. Prem, Jan. So magicmind.com/PREMJAN. That link is in our episode description. You can click it directly. You don't even have to worry about typing it in, but just in case you're an auditory learner, it's PremJan is the / after magicmind.com. There is no better time to start now. It's a brand new year. It's 2025. Get your mental wealth right. This is the year to do it. If you've been waiting, this is the perfect opportunity to start. Make 2025 the year you build your mental resilience. Improve both your sleep and your awake clarity with Magic Mind. I wouldn't steer you wrong, you number one podcast listeners. I haven't steered my brother wrong. My dad's taken it. My friends have taken it. So give this bundle a chance. You have nothing to lose. These savings are right there, and you can trust Magic Mind's ingredient, the whole 9. So you already know, number one podcast. Don't play yourself and not take advantage of this Magic Mind deal. So speaking of not playing yourself, let's hit that intro, baby.
I'm petty as hell.
And
I'm super petty.
here we
Petty Le Pew.
go.
Are you number one podcast listeners? I got to deliver on what I promised earlier. You played yourself. This is Buckeye-related. You're not. It might make it seem like my apology wasn't sincere. It is sincere, but I do have a bone to pick. You played yourself goes to the hindsight 2020 crowd with Ryan Day and losing to Michigan, and this fucking lunatic fringe narrative that one of our own, ESPN's Kirk Herbstreit, started. I have a bone to pick ever since I heard it after the Ohio State-Tennessee game. It has fucking grinded my gears, and I've been waiting for this moment. And no greater time than to keep that same energy. Then after I was wrong about Ryan Day and Ohio State wins the national championship, this is the perfect time for it because I don't duck the petty. Originator of the petty alert, we are not ducking anything, but I got to address this because nobody else is. First up, this is from Ari Wasserman on X. He said the following, and I think it summarizes things perfect. You really want to know why people get so mad at Ryan Day? Because with the way this team is constructed, everyone knew this Ohio State team was in there somewhere, and nobody could understand what took so long for it to show up. It's really that simple. Couldn't have said it better myself, but in pure Prem Brulee fashion, number one podcast in your headphones, I gotta elaborate. This fucking victory lap people seem to be taking at Ohio State fans who are disappointed at Ryan Day is absolutely asinine. Let me preemptively say, anybody that's taking it too far, tweeting at players, you already know we are not with that here at Prem Brulee. Tweeting at players, Ryan Day's kids were getting trash talk thrown their way. Like, that shit is just ridiculous. We're keeping things just about the field of play and to the people getting paid millions of dollars, and that's Ryan Day, the head football coach of Ohio State, who knows what he's signing up for. His family did not sign up for that same level of ridiculousness and did not sign up for it in that manner. Everything's kept to the field in the appropriate avenues. Twitter, keeping it just about the on-field product. Goes without saying, but do feel like I got to say that, especially since we're going to address this lunatic fringe narrative. But this victory lap, people seem to be taking at Ohio State fans who were disappointed at Ryan Day, especially after the Michigan loss. Listen to me, and listen to me good if you're not familiar with this. There are 3 goals at Ohio State as the head football coach. Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win the national championship. The first one, beating Michigan, especially this year, should have been the easiest box to check out of those 3 main goals. They were favored by a lot. The talent was not even close. We've talked about this a bunch. But this notion, like, you guys are pulling a fast one on these fans who were rightfully upset after that Michigan loss this year. I guess you must be upset that they won the national championship. No, the fuck, we're not upset. We just didn't think after that Michigan game that they were gonna finish with the national championship, and don't act like you ever did either. Since he did that last goal, winning a national championship, there's not a sane Ohio State fan in Buckeye Nation that thinks it's not enough. We're not that naive. We're not that stupid. Don't start attaching these narratives about people with unreal expectations, like as if a national championship isn't enough. It's plenty. It's the main goal. We just rightfully didn't think it was in the realm of possibility after you lose to a 500 Michigan team who have more talent than, clearly. Ryan Day, up until this year, was repeatedly 0-3 on those goals of beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten, and winning the national championship. He earns shutting us all up for hitting that hardest goal. He sure picked the hardest path to achieve what he wanted to, but he shut us all the way up. One thing I do want to address, though, to those of you taking this victory lap or like somehow being unnecessarily righteous as if you know more than us or something, like our take was invalid. It is okay for Ohio State fans to not accept underperforming from their coach. Y'all thinking you're the smart one for just being prisoner of the moment from getting the benefit of results of a playoff game and the benefit of hindsight is not it. It's not a way for you to prove that you are fucking correct or have the right to be righteous against us. The results of this national championship, while making us elated for the first few games, I would say, especially after that Oregon win, that emphatic Oregon win, it made Ohio State fans wonder and mad that he didn't coach this way against Michigan. Why did it take a sorry game and sorry performance to play this way? That's the frustration. Like Ari Wasserman's tweet, that's the frustration. We knew this team was in there, and they didn't show up until their backs were against the wall, which, great. The way it happened is storybook. Now, I prefer to not lose to Michigan every year, so let's not make that cardiac method a habit. But forgive us if we were having high standards for head football coach at Ohio State. The standard is the fucking standard, and it'll never waver. Ryan Day won a national championship, so he met and exceeded the expectations and the standards. But until then, we were living in the moment, and rightfully so, with 4 straight Michigan losses. And that's not acceptable here. It never will be. It's not to him. It still isn't. It's still the job for next year. It's still the same 3 goals. Now, does it buy us a lot of peace and happiness winning a national championship? You bet your butt. But let's not act like this fucking... You guys are more right because you have the benefit of hindsight. And the narrative that Ohio State fans are not happy at this result is incredibly reductive and flat out stupid. You know it doesn't make sense. You think you're being this smart person, but you just look like a fucking dumbass because you're not seeing the whole picture. And I thought Doug Lesmerises, who covers Ohio State, has for years, on his podcast covered it great, addressing the lunatic fringe narrative, specifically speaking of righteous. Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler, after Ohio State beat Tennessee at home in the Horseshoe, went on, everybody knows it by now, quite a soapbox about this hypothetical lunatic fringe of fans. And Doug Lesmerises explained it perfectly. I'm going to attach a clip here, but it's on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, if you want to find the clip. Doug Lesmerises, who covers Ohio State. The full clip is worth watching. It's over 4 minutes, but obviously I'm going to chop up a little bit of it so you get the gist of it. That I think addresses that lunatic fringe scenario the best.
The Buckeyes aren't victims here. I think the loss to Michigan was as bad as any Ohio State loss in the last 20 years, and they did that, and that coaching staff did that. And I think Kirk Herbstreit is wounded, particularly when it comes to Ohio State fans, and he turns everything on fans. And he was talking about how the lunatic fringe has expanded. And I think he makes it too personal. If you think the lunatic fringe has expanded, maybe it's that your definition of lunatics is no longer correct. Maybe what these people are just sort of justifiably, reasonably upset Ohio State fans that Ohio State on the most important weekend of the year for the 4th straight year came out and played a horrible game in the most important game of the year. So there is this very quick thing, and I don't like it when broadcasters do it. They act like fans turned against this team for no reason. That team played an awful game against an overmatched opponent with much more talent. They earned the doubt. They earned the sports hate. And so let's not forget in the end why any of this exists. It's because of the fans. So if you are a fan who is personally attacking a player on social media or sending death threats or whatever, then you are the lunatic fringe. If you're just mad that the team lost and you think maybe the coach should be fired if he doesn't do a better job, you're not a lunatic.
It's not considered lunacy for fans to expect your coach with a lot of talent on his roster, clearly proven, speaking of hindsight, clearly proving he had the talent to beat Michigan, but not doing it. So you played yourself ghost to all that.
Yeah, I think you hit it on there. I mean, Ryan Day bought himself some time. Probably a lot of time.
A lot of time,
yeah. Right? And it still does not change the fact that he has not shown up for that Michigan game. Say what you will, especially this year, it was absolutely ridiculous to only be putting up 10 points against that team. It should not happen. That team could not move the ball at all. Our defense played out of their mind against Michigan. They came up with stop after stop after stop. It was only because the offense was so inept that they put the defense in these field goal moments, right? And so trying to justify that this is anything but okay is ridiculous. Like you said, the standard is the standard. When you coach at The Ohio State University, when you coach the football team at The Ohio State University, you are set. You are part of a different standard. It's almost like you are at an elected office, and we don't agree with it. There's no petty alert that will be approved for you going after personally anyone, a player, family member, you name it. But the idea that you are immune from that is not accurate. It's part of the job. You could probably put clips that Urban Meyer has put also on the podcast that he does, where he talks about the standard being the standard.
And I'm going to speak about the Ohio State fan base. Are they rugged? Are they tough? Are they high expectations? They expect you to win every game. They expect you to beat your rival and win a national championship. I'll help you. You're damn right they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, every person that puts on a scarlet and gray helmet better believe they and demand that they do too, because that's not for the timid. The expectations will never change. No, there's no media member. There's no assistant coach. There's no one that's ever going to say, you know what, we got to temper this down a little bit.
When you take this job, when you look at it, it's seen as one of the premier jobs because you have so many eyes on you. Ryan Day, where he deserves so much credit, is, especially this year, is he brought in Chip Kelly and he took his hands off of the offense. He probably had some say into the game plan and all of that, like a head coach should. But if Chip Kelly actually had the change taken off of him for that Michigan game and didn't get in his head, I think it would be a very different game. Chip Kelly, for the most part, as a head coach even, going back all the way, rarely misses the mark against inferior opponents. Chip Kelly is not a big game coach, never has been, even at Oregon, especially in the NFL, but he rarely misses the mark. And Michigan this year was such an inferior opponent. They did not know how to pass the football. And when you have an opponent like that, you just have to beat them down into submission. And that's what Urban Meyer did. That's what Tressel did. And so I think that's where it's annoying to be grouped in that setting. But, we lived in the 90s, many of us, even the people that are listening here. They went through the John Cooper stage of just being like, okay, I guess we're going to lose this game. It can't be that way.
I know we got a couple more college football. You played yourselves. My next you played yourself goes to Brian Kelly, who's LSU's coach, a former Notre Dame coach. Immediately before Marcus Freeman, he brought in Marcus Freeman as defensive coordinator and then left, I believe, a season later for the LSU job. Then Marcus Freeman was named the head coach of Notre Dame. Brian Kelly, when leaving and asked about why he left Notre Dame, he said, quote, "I want to be in an environment where I have the resources to win a national championship," end quote. Brian Kelly said that in April 2022 after leaving Notre Dame for LSU. In case you missed it, Notre Dame played for a national championship just this past week, and LSU has not made the college football playoff since Kelly took over.
So congratulations, you played yourself.
Played yourself. And Vish, you got one for me?
Yeah. I have a quote. Everything comes full circle. And this was said by current Syracuse quarterback Kyle McCord, who was last year's Ohio State quarterback. He said this right after what we alluded to before, where Ohio State shit themselves, imploded, whatever verbiage you want to use, against Michigan. And this was the same day that Syracuse pretty much knocked Miami out of the ACC title game and essentially any shot that they had at the playoff. And I get it that you might be a little bitter and you want to play with fire and you want your quarterback to play with fire. We talked about Will Howard, how he embodied and bought into the culture of Ohio State. The way he talked throughout the year, the way he talked even after the Michigan loss, he understood it. He's a transfer. Has nothing to do, not from Columbus, not from the area, but he understood the significance of him letting down the team. And so you want to have that fire, but go about it differently. So a huge, you played yourself to Kyle McCord. All the stepping in rhinoceros shit coming out of your car or whatever that is. I don't wish ill will on anybody, but my God, kept running his mouth, kept thinking, oh yeah, Ohio State didn't want me. Yeah, no shit. We didn't want you.
Look, I stay petty so I don't have to get petty.
Because you didn't play with that fire when you were at Ohio State. If you did, you'd still be here. You barely beat out Devin Brown, a quarterback that wore number 33.
Petty alert. Petty alert.
Ridiculous.
Petty alert.
It was a quarterback competition, and that's all that needs to be said. I guess I'll kind of go into it. I know we're not talking too much NFL, but this is very much Buckeye, so I'm trying to transition really nicely. Another former Buckeye quarterback that could not beat Michigan, C.J. Stroud, as part of my Houston Texans. He played phenomenally this past Saturday against the Chiefs. Losing that game was super frustrating, and that's all I got to say. It sucks to see a Buckeye quarterback who's given hope to this franchise again after Deshaun Watson, after some down years of David Culley and Bobby Smith. And they really held their own from an offensive perspective and a defensive perspective. You can't blame everything on the refs, but when the national media is saying, especially the announcers in the broadcast booth of Joe Buck and Troy Aikman saying, man, this is pretty shitty and it's pretty leaning the other way. If you follow Warren Sharp on X or Twitter, he has this whole thread on exactly how the Chiefs benefit. We'll get into our picks later. And yes, the Texans did not show up on the special team side with some bad missed field goals, a missed extra point, even the opening kickoff where they let out a huge return on top of a penalty, you name it. They didn't set themselves up to win, and you can't do that against the Chiefs, but it was still super frustrating and a huge you played yourself to the NFL and the referees for allowing the NFL to become, like soccer is, a flop-centric league.
That Mahomes flop was nuts.
It was ridiculous. So it was just one of those you just shake your head and you're like,
Yeah.
Really? I get it. There's gamesmanship that go into it, and you're trying to get the extra edge, but Mahomes is already Mahomes for a reason, and to do some of that extra shenanigans stuff, it's just shitty. So
my non-sports you played yourself for your number one podcast listeners, 'tis the season. I feel like I address this most years we get any sort of snow. The people who do not clean snow off their car and try to drive.
Oh my God. You gotta be kidding. I hate this.
Yes. You gotta clean off your fucking car. At best, it's not getting on your own windshield, but then your snow is blowing on the cars behind you and around you. So take a few seconds, either warm up your car or invest in some sort of brush to get the snow off.
They're very inexpensive. You can
get them anywhere. A gas station, a grocery store, Amazon, whatever. Get something to clean off your car. Keep it in your car. So when you park somewhere, if it snows, you can clean it off. It is not acceptable to look like you are driving an igloo. Okay. Always a nice segue into our Am I Hating section. Number one podcast listeners, you know we love a good deal of hating, but we're in a safe space here. So a reminder to submit yours, any non-sports you played yourself, a sports related you played yourself, or any Am I Hating, we would love to hear from you. But my one for this first edition of 2025 is saying Happy New Year's with an S. It's Happy New Year. There is no S on there. That'd be like saying Merry Christmases. I don't know why people don't know this. Adding the phantom S to New Year's, there are not multiple New Years that we're celebrating. It's just one year that we are celebrating. So it is Happy New Year. If you see someone new, please keep the S off.
Yeah, I would say it's for a lot of things. We just add extra S's.
Yeah.
People add extra S's. Like, even, I know I've gone on grocery store rants on this podcast before of the self-checkouts and grocery carts, you name it. But Kroger's, Myers,
Oh, I hate that.
Aldi's, there's no S on them.
Yeah.
There's no S on them.
No apostrophe S. It's not like you're going to multiple locations. There's no apostrophe S. Some do.
It
These
is.
don't.
I feel like for Happy New Year, I didn't even know people did that, and I don't think it's hating. I think it's just you got to stop. So,
Amen. Always a safe space here. All right, number one podcast listeners, let's move on to who you got and what you feeling. Vish, so last episode, Akshat and I picked opening round games. Akshat went 4 for 4. At that point, I was very down on Ohio State, so picked against them, and I couldn't have been more wrong. Again, happily wrong. We picked the opening round games, and they went pretty chalk. And then it just so happened that all those teams that played in the opening round games beat the top 4 seeds too. So all the teams we collectively picked also moved on into the Final Four. So that's kind of crazy how that worked out. Very interested to see the bigger sample size as more of these 12-team playoffs happen. I imagine one of those teams with the bye is going to win one, I would assume, eventually with the bigger sample size. Okay. This episode, since it is the season, you transitioned us into NFL, covering NFL stuff. So I wanted to pick who we think's going to make the Super Bowl. Essentially, we're picking the NFC Championship game, the AFC Championship game, and just in case that you're not on the next episode, I want to get your Super Bowl pick with those two teams. So, NFC Championship, who you got? Commanders versus Eagles. By the way, a nice you played yourself. Believe me, I know we're keeping the focus on college, but a nice you played yourself to the Dallas Cowboys of the NFC East, watching two of their division teams meet in the NFC Championship game and now hold the title for longest drought to making the NFC Championship game, the Final Four. No end in sight, so that amount of time since 96 is just going to keep growing endlessly, and no end in sight.
Congratulations.
Again,
you played yourself.
I'm not ready to exhume football is dead regarding NFL, so I'm not going to try to bring the mood down. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. Commanders versus Eagles. Who you got, Vish?
yeah, I think when the playoffs started, this would have been a pipe dream for the Commanders to make this. A lot of this actually does hinge on Jalen Hurts' health. The knee was pretty banged up, and he was pretty non-committal after the press conference on Sunday. It was Sunday, right? They played on Sunday.
Yeah.
And yes, the Eagles' O-line is intense. Saquon Barkley is next level home run hitter. But if this turns into a shootout and Hurts is not there, it's Commanders all the way. I hate to use that as a crutch, but if Hurts is even semi-healthy, it adds a huge dynamic to be able to open up that passing game. I don't think Kenny Pickett is that person, so it is a cop-out, but I would just say if Hurts is playing, we're doing this on early in the week, so if Hurts is playing, I think the Eagles win. If Hurts is not, even 50%, it's going to be the Commanders that's going to be in the Super Bowl. What do you think?
I think I'm going with the Eagles on this one. I know the Commanders have been playing incredible, but these are two teams really familiar with each other. Obviously, being in the NFC East, they've played each other twice and splitting the series for the year, both being close games, so they're quite familiar with each other. I think the Eagles' home field will play a factor in this. For what it's worth, the weather's supposed to be fine in this matchup if the early indicators are true. It's supposed to be in the 40s randomly. So I'm going with the Eagles. Obviously, your point is valid with Hurts' health, but I think Saquon's a great equalizer, and then their familiarity, and the Eagles' defense is playing great. So I'm going with the Eagles this one. Don't care for either of these teams, so whatever. As always, this time of year, I'm Team Snacks, so here we are again.
What it do, baby?
Okay. Over in the AFC Championship game, it is the top two seeds. The Buffalo Bills will travel to Kansas City to play the Dark Magic Kansas City Chiefs. Also worth noting, it looks like the weather's pretty decent on Sunday as well for Kansas City. We'll see if that holds. Obviously, like Vish said, we're early in the week, so all that's subject to change and be incorrect. But who you got in this one, Vish?
I'm only picking on who I'm going to be rooting for. It's the Buffalo Bills, and that's the only reason why. I think the Chiefs are inevitable. If I'm going with my head or if I'm betting on the game, I would probably pick the Chiefs, especially because they're at home and they're going for this unprecedented three-peat, which is pretty remarkable. But because I'm not going to be rooting for them, I don't want them to win. And
Petty alert, petty alert, petty alert.
I agree with you. Not rooting for them, but I do think they're going to win. I think I would like to see the Bills out of the four teams left. The Bills are the clear and obvious choice for me to be okay with them winning versus the two teams that obviously in the Cowboys division and then the Dark Magic Chiefs. So anyway, so Vish, who do you have winning the Super Bowl? You can go off your rooting interest or who you actually think is going to win.
So even though I picked the Bills, I think the Chiefs will win. But, I'm going to just say the Bills. Essentially the AFC Championship. So I'm going to stay with the Bills, and they finally pulled through and get something for that city that's kind of gone through the thick of it, especially in the 90s where, they ran into your Dallas Cowboys and when they were at their heyday and what that looked like. So I guess if thinking that Hurts is going to be less than 50%, Bills over Commanders. If Hurts is over, it's Bills over Eagles. And
yeah, I'm going with the three-peat. It's hard for me to bet against them. It's crazy the anomaly and ways they're finding to win. So I'm going Chiefs over Eagles in the Super Bowl. I think it'll be close, but yeah, I think they all show up in big games. So we'll see. We're covering all four teams here. I'm sure it'll be a combination of them, and we'll both be a little bit wrong, but we'll see. Let's move on to what you feeling. I'll go ahead and go first. Obviously, I think we're both feeling the Buckeyes national champs. It is quite a surreal feeling. It still doesn't feel real that they won it all, but it's fun getting to do this again, and I'd never take it for granted. I always remember my best friend's dad saying in 2002, they don't come around often, so enjoy the moment, enjoy that glory. That's why I refuse to let the hindsight 2020 and that lunatic fringe narrative go unchecked, because I am going to enjoy this. I'm a diehard Buckeye fan. I do it the right way. I watch every game. I support the team. I'm critical of them when they deserve it, but only the product on the field. And it feels good to watch your team win. We've experienced it with the Astros, Vish, and our whole family, and we've now you and I have really got to experience 3 of them: 2002, 2014, and now 2024, 25, and they never get old. It really is the coolest thing to experience and get a new perspective on. My son's just starting to, he knows to say go Bucks and knows about football a little bit. Obviously he won't remember this title, but it's cool to see it through that lens now and appreciate the different moments that I've been in my life to get to experience these national championships. So, and then in addition to that, getting to go to the opening playoff game at Ohio Stadium in the Horseshoe against Tennessee, seeing so many Tennessee fans there, but then getting to see them all leave early and see how loud the stadium was, even with so many Tennessee fans. They thought they were doing a Tennessee takeover. They were calling it Neyland North. And to see them all leaving so early was truly incredible. Being in at Ohio State game in December in the shoe, first of its kind, it was a cool experience getting to go to that. It was so cold that game, but so fun to go to it, and really glad I did that. And then what I'm feeling especially is my boys' birthdays. Both my sons either just had birthdays or have one coming up. My son Barrett turned 3 a few days ago, and my younger son Otis is about to be 1, and I cannot believe it. Time's flying. I don't need to tell the parents who are number 1 podcast listeners out there this, but it truly is going warp speed, and that's what I'm feeling lately.
Yeah, it's just crazy how time flies, and it's cool to see, even though they won't remember it or they were all sleeping as the Buckeyes won, and it was just cool to know. And I'm, when I woke up my son Calvin this morning, it was like, hey, the Buckeyes won, and he just goes, yay, not really realizing what that means. But and then here's another thing that a little tidbit that will make us feel a little bit old. So someone at work was telling me today, like, oh, how about them Buckeyes? And, the small talk that exists in the workplace. And I'm sure many of the number 1 podcast listeners are experiencing that as well. But he's like, yeah, I didn't really remember 2014 as much. I was only like 12. And I was like, what? So I was like, yeah, I was out of grad school, I guess. That's cool. So it was a surreal moment. But, really just looking forward to, in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to come down with Calvin and spend time right before Otis turns 1 and really just celebrate them. And it's just really cool just to be able to experience that, see life through their eyes, and also exhibit a lot of patience. And I'm sure they saw us at our low in late November, and they were sleeping through our high couple days ago. So
no doubt. All right, number 1 podcast listeners, you know how I like to finish each episode with that too much sense, so let's hit that intro. Number 1 podcast listeners, this reached my algorithm, and I thought it was perfect. If there was something that's probably like the book of Prem, chapter 1, verse 1, or close to it, it's this. This is a quote from Dane Thomas. It says, "Tell them you love them over and over again. Tell them too much and never too little, for the time we have is short, but the love we have is endless."
Wow. Love it.
Yeah. Love it. I live by this. I think a few years ago, maybe even before that, I think number 1 podcast listeners have heard this before. When I think about someone, I try to text them. I always try to live by that, because I know the feeling of having that sent my way, and I just want people to know how I feel about them, and I don't think it's ever the wrong time to show your love. I tell my people I love them whenever I get a chance. It might be too much. They might think it's too much, but it's never enough for me. I always want them to know how I feel about them. I think too often we wait for a right time, and I think it's always the right time to show love. So that's my too much sense for this week. Tell someone you're thinking about them. Tell them you love them. I never try to miss a chance. I get to podcast with my bro. We chop it up before and after, and we always end with love you. And I think that's something that as we've gotten older, we've embraced a lot more, I would say. I don't know if it's like being macho or being young or both, or I think it's just something that you appreciate and a lot of people around me appreciate. So I always try to show my love for my people, and I hope you number one podcast listeners do the same. And it's a good reminder, the love, we're showing it in terms of gifts and advice. Remember, like I told you about mental wealth, I try to exercise it in Too Much Sense, but also exercise it with Magic Mind. Do not forget about that link. Go get that 24-hour pack from Magic Mind. That's magicmind.com/premjan, PREMJAN. It's magicmind.com/premjan. And that link will take you. You don't need a coupon code. It gets you the deal I'm telling you about. Up to 45% off a bundle with both the Magic Mind performance shots and the sleep shots. So you got 24 hours of coverage. Don't play yourself. Number one podcast listeners, I wouldn't steer you wrong, just like I haven't with this brand new edition of the number one podcast in your headphones, Prem Brulee. I've been your host, Premal Bhatt. That's been my co-host, Big Bro, Vish Bhatt. We are both very proud alums of the Ohio State University, the national champions of the college football world. Don't ever play yourself. Top of the world. Ryan Day, the biggest mea culpa for me, but you sure did prove us wrong, and we are so happy you did. Go Bucks, now, forever, and always.
100%. It's remarkable. 9 championships, and we've got to experience 3 in our lifetime, so hopefully more to come, and it's been fantastic to be able to experience this with even our cousins and, you know, Buckeye fans through and through. And I know one of our cousins is a UT alum, so it hurt Niche a little bit more around that. But
yeah,
so shout out to Niche, and if she's made it through this far.
Oh yeah. All right, number one podcast listeners, that does it for a brand new edition of Prem Brulee. I've been your host, Premal Bhatt. That's been my co-host, Vish Bhatt. And you already know the drill. Like, review, comment, tell a friend to tell a friend. Share these episodes to your social media. Everything's greatly appreciated. I can't tell you, number one podcast listeners, how much it means to me to get the support from you all. And we'll talk to you on the next edition.
All right, see you.
Peace.